Thank God round 10's over, because I think I was close to pulling a hamstring just from watching. And while Magic Round is looking a bit like a reserve grade showcase after all the injuries, I've got no doubt this is still going to be a great weekend of rugby league. One of the great weekends in Australian sport for the year. And while no one's going to really care about their games in the long term because everyone's going to be so hammered, we may as well start tipping some rugby league football. We kick things off the same way we did last year in the Friday 6 p.m. slot. The Raiders, they're hosting the Bulldogs, and the Bulldogs are surprising favourites. Obviously, the Raiders are missing a bunch of their key players. They managed to pull off that miracle win over Manly, although Manly holding double-digit leads isn't actually that impressive. The Dogs, though, they've been very impressive so far this year. Ever since those first early rounds where it looked like we're seeing the same Dogs as last year, they've really turned it around. They've been able to compete with some of the top-tier sides. I mean, look, Penrith did lose Nathan Cleary halfway through the game last week. This is still the Penrith Panthers, and for the Dogs to only lose by that sort of margin compared to what would have happened in previous years is definitely an improvement. So both these teams, it'll be good to see which of them can really cement themselves as a genuine finals contender. But I am going to tip the Raiders, and maybe I'm falling into a trap here because I'm sort of am just waiting for this Bulldogs patch of form to drop off, because we do tend to see when teams improve a lot, like we saw with the Cowboys a few years ago and the Warriors last year. They are a bit inconsistent, and they do occasionally have the off game in a game where they should be winning. And while I don't even think they should be winning this game, they are favourites with the bookies. But I'm going to tip the Raiders, because I just think their strength is the Bulldogs' weakest part of their game, which is the middle forward. So I'm going to take the Raiders 1-12. The primetime game of Magic Round once again, for some bloody reason, Manly are hosting the Brisbane Broncos at Suncorp, which is in Brisbane, in case you didn't know. No Tommy Turbo, no Adam Reynolds, but we do get to see DCE versus Reece Welsh. Now, the Brisbane Broncos are huge favourites, and obviously that probably should be so. They've absolutely pumped the crap out of Manly the last 2 years at Magic Round, because this might just be the worst home fixture of all time. Now, the Broncos, you probably think, are going to win this game with ease, not just because of the situation and the form line from what we've seen the past number of years, but also Manly, after had such a good start to the year, they've absolutely fallen off a rugby league cliff. However, Manly have seemed to go from the flat track bullies into being the team that wins the games that they're underdogs and then chokes the games where they're the favourites. So, while I don't think they're going to win, maybe don't rule this one out completely. That being said, though, I do think the Brisbane Broncos will probably win, and probably win comfortably. It is Manly. Tolutau Coola's absolutely going to step up without Tommy Turbo, so Manly 13+. Am I dreaming? You better believe it. The early Saturday game, the hangover recovery game, the Titans, they're hosting the Newcastle Knights, and both teams, after they had such shocking starts to the year, are showing a bit of fight, especially the Titans. However, they're going to have no Foran, they're going to have no Brimson, they're going to have no Campbell. Obviously, they don't have Tino, so basically the Queensland Cup team's going to be playing. And it only took Ponga having to be out for 12 weeks for the Newcastle Knights to turn their season around, so maybe they should have just not played him when it looks like he had that really bad hip injury. But well, you live and you learn. But this is going to be a pretty interesting contest. I've got to tip the Newcastle Knights. I would have loved to see the Titans play this at their relatively full strength side, like they got to play last week, but they've just got so many injuries. I think this is an easy game for the Newcastle Knights to win. That being said, if it's the Newcastle Knights team I've known for about a decade now, it's probably going to be another choke. Match of the round alert, match of the year alert, potentially. The Cronulla Sharks, they're hosting the Sydney Roosters, and despite how good the Sharks have been, the concern around Nico Hines makes them underdogs in this game, because they're going up against the Sydney Roosters. And after 3 to 4 years of mediocrity, it's finally like we're seeing the salary cap cheating God squad we've been predicting them to be for a number of years now. Now, obviously, this game's hard to predict without knowing if Nico Hines is going to be playing. We'll probably have to wait up until the hour before kickoff team lists are out to actually get a good gauge. But even then, the Cronulla Sharks proved against the Melbourne Storm they can get the job done without him. Whether they can back that up against the form team of the competition, I'm not too sure. And last week was such an emotional game for them. All this talk about them not beating top 4 teams, then they went and beat Melbourne in Melbourne without their superstar player. Now, this will be a really good test. Even if the Cronulla Sharks can just back up, they don't even have to win, but if they put in a good performance, it shows that they really are on that level of a premiership contender. contender, whereas anyone can fluke a game here or there. I said it first, even before the Tigers game that they dropped, that they were a premiership contender based on what I saw in those early rounds, but I do think that this is just as big as a test as we saw last week, because it's easy to get up for one game to prove a lot of people wrong, but can you do it again? Now, the Sydney Roosters, I am going to tip them simply for the fact that I'm not sure if Nico is going to be playing, and while as good as the Cronulla Sharks have looked all season, how the Sydney Roosters have looked the last month is absolutely insane. Now, I think everyone will be going home after that Roosters-Sharks game because, unfortunately, the Bunnies, they're taking on the Cowboys, and somehow the main event slot of the Saturday of Magic Round, the Cowboys have absolutely fallen off a cliff, and, well, I guess the Rabbitohs did that 12 months ago. So, honestly, there's not much to talk about here. I think the Rabbitohs are improving a little bit, but they still look far from beating any other team. Honestly, looking back, it's actually so impressive they beat the Bulldogs when they did. But I'm going to tip the Cowboys here because the Cowboys, they need to win just as much. And while they've had a horrible run so far over the last 5 to 6 weeks, I still think they're showing a bit more than the Bunnies. So I'm going to tip the Cowboys, and you bet I'm going to tip them 13+. Now, this was probably going to be the match of the round, but for some reason, the New Zealand Warriors have decided they've jumped off a cliff. And the Penrith Panthers, well, they're without Nathan bloody Cleary. So unfortunately, this game has been dampened. And while I have been tipping the Warriors to turn it around the last few weeks and really want them to, I'm really starting to get to the point where I just don't see it coming back, at least for this season. Ever since that Fisher-Harris signing and that draw to Manly, they have just looked like a complete shell of themselves. It looks like the old school Warriors. I don't know what happened to the Wars of last year or even the early part of this season, but they're going up against Penrith, and unless you're going to play your best, Penrith are going to wipe the floor with you. Last year, when they almost beat Penrith, was really one of the Warriors showing out parties to prove that they were a genuine threat in that competition last year. So hopefully they can get that back. But I'm tipping Penrith because, well, I've actually got a rugby league brain. The Storm taking on the Eels, another game hampered by injury, so Sunday's not looking the best in terms of seeing superstar players. But unfortunately for the Eels, it has been just a horrible season so far after a promising start. And well, that's not entirely their fault. They have lost their 2 best players, and you take that out of any team, and they're going to struggle as much as the Eels. I think all the talk around Brad Arthur being under pressure is absolute nonsense. This is a huge opportunity for Mitchell Moses to stake a claim, not just to get the Eagles season back on track, but also with Origin around the corner now that Nathan Cleary is missing the entire Origin series. So, unfortunately, I probably will be back in the Eels, which isn't a sentence I say too often, but the Melbourne Storm, when do they lose 2 in a row? I think it's happened once in a decade, so I'm going to tip the Melbourne Storm here. And the NRL really saving the best till last. The Tigers, they're hosting the Dolphins, and while last year Dolphins fever was at an all-time high, unfortunately I don't think it might be the same case this year because, well, the Dolphins are in the dead slot. Now, last year, the Sunday 6 p.m. game was arguably the match of the round between the Eels and the Titans, so hopefully this match can live up to it. I have been back in the Tigers the last few weeks because I just feel like they have been good, but in saying that, their ladder position doesn't show it because, well, they just keep losing the games. But the Dolphins, they've been going under the radar, probably the most out of any team in this competition. They get the lucky Thursday to Sunday turnaround somehow, and they're getting even more of their good players back. So I'm going to tip the Dolphins, and unfortunately, I think this might be another coming out party like last year for them, so I'm going to tip them 13+. But ladies and gentlemen, there are my tips and predictions for Magic Round 2024. I'm taking the Raiders 1-12, Manly 13+, the Knights 13+, the Roosters 1-12, the Cowboys 13+, Penrith 13+, the Storm 13+, and the Dolphins 13+. Hopefully this isn't a blowout round as I'm predicting, but I can't even go 8 for 8 this year, and we're already at round 11, so what the bloody hell do I know? But ladies and gentlemen, let me know what your tips are for Magic Round in that comment section down below. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.